Welcome aboard the Decade Bird. Stay tuned for an unabridged audio presentation from the Star Wars Expanded Universe.
A long time ago. In a galaxy far, far away. Star Wars. Tales from the New Republic. Edited by Peter Schweighofer and Craig Carey. Read by Decade Bird Publishing. Simple Tricks. By Cassidy and Tish Pahl. "Well, Captain," the port mechanic drawled, running a filthy rag between his blackened hands. "You've done quite a number on your ship here." "I didn't do anything to my ship," Finn Nabon barked. "A power flux ripped us out of hyperspace. It fried the drive, cooked the backup, and melted the stabilizers and motivator on its way out." Finn knew she should have patched the hyperdrive together with spit and engine tape and coaxed the Star Lady into Nadra City, Prishardia's planetary capital. But the planet guide glibly guaranteed a standard-class starport with all amenities, in Lesval, Prishardia's second-largest city. On landing in the agricultural backwater, Finn realized she was more likely to find the promised excellent accommodations and dining opportunities in the molten core of Hoth. The pasture of some smelly, indeterminate ruminant ringed the spaceport. More ominous, Finn noted, were the rusted swoops and ancient, gutted freighters which littered the cramped landing pad. She doubted anything in the port had operated under its own power in the last 16 years. And the greaseball now droning on was likely personally responsible for the disrepair. Gib, as the name stitched on his coveralls proclaimed him, paused to spit expressively onto the baked dirt, wisely missing the lady's extended ramp, then withdrew a data pad from a grimy pocket.
"This is the inventory of replacement drives we can get, from here or from Nadris."
As she reviewed the meager list, Finn realized why she had to pry the pad out of Gib's shaking hands. There was a very old, very overpriced Horizon Hopper. The Soro sub would entail a repair even Finn wouldn't attempt. Several new Lifesaver 1000s were also handy, Death Wish included free of charge. There wasn't even a quick and dirty substitute that was safe enough and cheap enough to get her to a decent shipyard. The bulge in the little man's throat rose and fell.
"We don't have anything else,"
he choked. Finn shoved the pad back at him. "Space, there wasn't even anything worth stealing." "How long?" she growled.
"We can order an avatar,"
Gib stammered. "How long?" Finn repeated, a little closer and a lot louder.
"Corellia is a long way, even at."
"How long?" Finn was so close she could smell the chew that hung on him. Gib whispered,
"A month, maybe 2.
1 month, Finn ordered.
"Yes, Captain,"
Gib squeaked before rushing off. "Finn, you should teach diplomacy," a cultured voice scolded. Gitza Dogder emerged from the shadows of the Star Lady's ramp. "I didn't hear you offering to help," Finn retorted. "Why would you need a con artist when your intimidation and yelling were so very effective?" Brandishing a datapad, Gitza continued. "I decided to read about our temporary home instead." "The rube who wrote that backgrounder is a dead man," Finn gritted. "I'm gonna get a drink in the ship." "You coming?" "No, I think I will investigate for a little while." Finn shrugged and headed up the lady's ramp. At the hatch she turned back to say something, but her partner had already disappeared into the decaying spaceport building. Gitza's ambiguous statement set off a muted alarm in Finn's head. It wasn't as if she was worried about her partner's safety. Even in an unfamiliar place the con always took care of herself. The real big worry was that Gitza's sharp eye had probably spied something in the backgrounder on Lesval. Something Finn missed. "Sith," Finn muttered, scraping some of the pasture from her boot tread. Digging her fists into her pockets, she went in search of the bottle of Corellian reserve she kept for really bad days. Whatever the crisis, Corellia had the cure. Finn was into her third drink, cursing fates and the universe, when her partner finally returned carrying a fist-sized, bright orange fruit. As Gitza set it down on the table, Finn eyed the fruit suspiciously. There were several explanations, each worse than the last. I don't suppose you picked that up for a snack? Of course not, Finn, Gitza sniffed haughtily. That's right. You haven't had a non-liquid meal since the Battle of Ender, Finn called as Gitza retreated toward her cabin. Against her better judgment, Finn climbed slowly to her feet and followed. Gitz, what are you up to? Finn asked as she leaned against the open hatch to Gitza's quarters, nursing her drink. Just a way to pass the time and refresh the coffers while we wait for your beloved Corellian parts, came the muffled reply. Only Gitza's hindquarters, sticking out from a stowage closet, were visible. Finn had to resist the urge to administer a swift kick. Gitza emerged a moment later, shaking out her prize. Finn felt her jaw drop. No, she said sternly. Gitza responded by pulling on the simple robe. You must be joking. Finn, you know I have no sense of humor. A metal cylindrical handle appeared from the robe's deep pocket. Gitza experimentally flicked the switch on and off. Nothing happened, of course. Gitza pushed past her partner, headed for the main cabin. Finn once again trailed behind her. I'm surprised that after all these years you haven't been able to con a real one from someone, Finn mumbled. Gitza was suddenly quite serious. Given what we've heard recently about the Jedi Academy from the fringe, I would not be surprised to see lightsabers showing up on the black market. Gitza stared at her, waiting, expectantly. Finn hedged. What? You know what, Gitza said impatiently. That rigged sabacc deck and the repulsor remote. Where are they? It was hopeless. Finn said, they're in the weapons closet, third shelf, in the back. How quaint, Gitza cooed, returning with Finn's lockbox. She set it on the table and sat across from Finn, helping herself to a glass of the reserve. In the time it took Finn to pour herself another, Gitza had jimmied the box open. This is a really bad idea, Finn finally said. Gitza picked up the fruit on the table and began drilling a delicate hole in it with her pocket knife. I confirmed what was in the backgrounder. There are thousands of people in Lesval and the only legal authority is more than 2,000 kilometers away. It's chaos out there. I'd be providing them an invaluable service. For target practice, Finn grumbled. Don't you remember what happened last time? Gitza nodded, but continued her carving. Can I just point out that the lady is out of commission? We don't have any way of getting out of here once they figure out you're a fraud. We shall just have to make sure they don't figure it out then, won't we? Finn swirled the golden liquor in her glass, admiring the way the contents clung to the sides before surrendering to gravity. I'm not helping you this time, she declared, knowing her resistance was as futile as her drinks, but still feeling the need to make a token stand. From across the table, Gitza handed her the remote's tiny control. Of course you will. Finn developed hate relationships with many places in the galaxy. She loathed Socorro during the hot season, detested Mos Eisley during the dusty season, and her irritation with the exorbitant prices of Coruscant during Fate Week was a matter of public record. But Lesval on Market Day earned a whole new level of disdain. With a deep breath Finn plunged into the throng of peasants and animals crowding the market square. Squeezing between an oversized vegetable cart and a booth of wheel-sized cheeses, Finn then swerved to avoid a shaggy something smelling vaguely of Nerf. When a gap-toothed woman in shapeless black thrust a squawking bird in her face, Finn almost cooked both poultry and purveyor with a blaster bolt. In contrast to Finn's mad dashing and darting through the market, Gitza's progress ahead was unhurried. Crowds and livestock magically parted for the woman in the brown robe. She walked serenely, the lightsaber handle swinging freely and conspicuously at her side. They were in the market barely 10 minutes when Finn began hearing the whispered word of awe and respect, Jedi. Finn circled around, seeing Gitza find her target. Two quarreling men, one as short as the other was fat, had attracted a crowd. Words and spittle flew, with fists sure to follow, to the smaller man's disadvantage. A groat stood between them, oblivious, complacently chewing her cud. Friends, Finn heard Gitza say. May I assist you? A hush fell as all eyes turned to the Jedi woman.
Who are you?
The larger man demanded.
Jedi.
someone called from the back.
Don't look like no Jedi.
The man snarled. Gitza smiled patiently. Size and sex are not the measure of a Jedi, friend. She gestured to a nearby fruit stand. I do not approve of casual use of the Force, her voice rang out. But the gentleman here requests some verification. Gitza held out her right hand. Her left, Finn knew, concealed a tiny remote which controlled the repulsor. A bright orange fruit rose from atop the mounted produce display, circled above the stunned crowd, then fell into Gitza's waiting palm. She gathered the growing crowd with her eyes and authoritative presence. I ask again, do you require the assistance of a Jedi?
I ask for Jedi mediation.
The small man stammered, with a feisty glare at his combatant.
Baxendel here sold me a breeding groat, but she's barren.
Finn turned away and began pushing against the throng, shaking her head in disgust. Gitza would wield her negotiation skills as others used weapons and pushed the men to some settlement involving cost of a groat's care, earning potential of a groat's milk, and value between a breeding and a barren groat. The grateful participants would then pay her for the trouble in some local currency or good. By the end of the afternoon, with another piece of floating fruit and a few, I can read your mind, sabacc tricks, the Lesval community would think Jedi Master Skywalker himself had come to pay a visit. Force forgive her, but Finn didn't want to stay around to watch. The moment would go down in the annals as one of the best of Finn's life. 29 days, 14 hours, and 27 minutes after a power flux forced her into the maker-forsaken Lesval, the brand spanking new Corellian Avatar 10 hyperdrive finally arrived.
Captain, she's a beauty.
That she is, Gib. Finn sighed happily and gazed adoringly at the glistening drive, the stabilizers, the motivator, and the converters, spread out carefully and ordered. I just wish we found the cause of that flux. Gib's small shoulders shrugged in his oversized uniform.
I've seen it on old whiteys before, especially the ones with so many custom features and special modifications. At least you know you won't blow the Avatar when you put it in.
A month's close observation revealed that Gib was a pretty fair mechanic. Finn hadn't asked, nor had Gib explained, where he became so well acquainted with old model starfighters and Corellian freighters. Everyone had a past and the secrets that go with it. Gib was right, though, these things did sometimes happen and the best you could hope for was that they don't kill you when they did. Finn bent down, picked up a rock, and pitched it at a groat wandering too close to her new hyperdrive. With a frightened bleat the animal bolted across the landing pad.
Jedi Gitza doesn't like it when you do that to her pets,
Gib warned, glancing about nervously. Well, she can just use her powers to stop me, Finn groused. With her busy social and negotiation schedule, Gitza wasn't there, but that didn't stop even the sensible Gib from worrying what the all-knowing Jedi would see. The whole con was going to Gitza's head and really getting to Finn. Apart from Gitza's solemn pontifications, the spaceport and ship filled with farm animals, sickly fruit wines, and other homegrown products, all gifts that grateful but very poor clients gave their revered, dealmaker Jedi. I'm gonna pull the readings off the old drive, Finn said, pulling her favorite scanner from her back pocket. Gib nodded.
I'll finish prepping the ship.
He disappeared into the lady, the tools on his belt clanking noisily. They wrestled the old drive out of the ship and set it on the grass next to the landing pad. With a few well-aimed rocks, Finn scattered the birds, more gifts to Jedi Gitza, that had taken to roosting on the drive. Squatting down, Finn gently turned the first section over and clicked on the scanner. She dusted off bits of blackened char between the 2 and 3 couplings, then continued down the drive shaft. And stopped. Finn thumbed the scanner off and rocked back on her heels. The good news was that she had just found, buried in the most inaccessible part of the drive, what had caused the power flux. The bad news. The timid,
excuse me,
so startled Finn that she reflexively hurled the nearest spanner in the direction of the voice. Finn scrambled to her feet. The uninvited visitor hit the ground to avoid swallowing her thrown tool. Ever heard of knocking? She snapped. As he stood slowly, Finn took in the simple brown robe he wore and the untouched metal handle at his waist.
Where?
He shrugged and looked about expressively. They were, after all, outside, on a spaceport landing pad. Finn checked the grin. Right. They sure started them young at Skywalker's ranch, Finn mused. This one couldn't be a day over 20. But then, wild rumors about the Jedi Academy had been flying for months in the fringe. Could this soft-faced, shaggy-haired youth really be a fully trained Jedi Knight? By all accounts, probably. And she could just guess what brought a Jedi Knight to the wilds of Lesval. Well, she said with a low whistle. Could it be one of the ascetic Luke Skywalker's little followers in the flesh? He straightened with her challenge but stumbled over the words.
Yes, I'm from Master Skywalker's Academy. I'm Zeth Faust.
Finn Ignabon. You can call me Finn. Another matter demanded her attention, one even more urgent than exploring what a real Jedi was doing here and what she was going to do about it. Finn crouched down again at the drive. I don't suppose the Force can tell you what these char marks between the couplings mean? Zeth squatted next to her.
It doesn't really work like that.
Too bad. Finn pulled a magnifier from her front pocket and began crawling up the length of the drive shaft. There. Between the 8th and 9th couplings.
What is it?
A soft voice asked, too close to her ear. She almost slugged him, just out of reflex. Here, she said and handed him the magnifier.
It looks like a wire.
It's an old saboteur's trick. You create a complete circuit by connecting the couplings of a hyperdrive. A piece of wire as thin as a hair will do the job. Then send a spark up the drive shaft and it'll arc, from one coupling to the next. Fry the entire system. She waved at the drive's far end. Somewhere in there I'll find the remains of a relay or battery that generated the power surge. Zeth cleared his throat.
Do you know why?
Finn slowly stood. Yeah. Probably. Someone's likely getting from my partner, gets a dogger. There was a sharp but not very surprising intake of breath.
She's why I've come,
Zeth said quickly, rising as well.
We've heard she is a very powerful Jedi and is doing much good here.
Well, she's got a lot of enemies, too. Finn was very proud she did not choke when Zeth intoned.
Those who do good things often have many enemies.
His young face turned somber.
And those with untrained force powers can be manipulated. Where is she?
He asked, now sounding more urgent. As soon as he meets Gitz, the gig will be up, Finn thought. That alone would be worth the admission price. I don't know, she finally said, making her decision. She had a negotiation today. But Gib will know where she is. Why didn't you catch a shuttle? Finn complained from the passenger seat of Zeth's rented landspeeder.
I didn't know where to go.
Zeth responded. His eyes wandered about the bucolic landscape.
Everyone within 1,000 kilometers was talking about the wonderful Jedi Gitza, but no one knew where she was.
Finn drummed her fingers on the console. They had sabotaged the ship on Chad, known her route, and set the drive to blow in the first inhabited system. But who? And why?
A force sensitive would be a very powerful asset to a criminal organization,
Zeth interrupted. Stay out of my head, spoonbender, Finn snapped.
I wasn't in your head, Finn,
Zeth said calmly.
Just making an obvious observation.
Keep it that way, then. Wanting to be conciliatory, but not apologetic, Finn added, lots of bad guys seem real determined to kidnap you Jedi types. Finn hadn't expected Zeth to flinch so obviously. What is it? She asked. He shook his head.
Nothing.
Turn right up ahead. She instructed. He drove through a battered and ancient gate and they both fell silent. Feeling the speeder steadily accelerate, Finn glanced at Zeth. He was staring ahead. She gave up trying to shake the anxiety mounting since they drove onto the property. They rounded a blind turn and the farmhouse was only a few meters farther. Finn was out of the speeder before Zeth coaxed it to a stop. It wasn't just the look of grim concern on his face or the silence which alarmed her. No, it was the clenching feeling in her gut. She'd felt the same way when she'd returned to that Ord Mantell cantina and found the man who had been her father dead on the floor. She yanked out her blaster and ran to the farmhouse. The door was open, ajar and askew. At the door's threshold lay a Jedi robe. I'm assuming it's someone from off-planet, Finn jabbered as they whizzed back through Lesval. I wonder why it took them so long.
They may have thought once your drive failed you would go to Nadris.
Szeth said.
And when you didn't, they looked the same way I did. A planet is a big place to search for a single person.
As the speeder banked hard on a turn, Finn was gratified Szeth was driving only slightly slower than she would be. Gib is checking for reports of any strangers. He may know something by the time we get back.
What's next then?
The Jedi asked. Listen, Szeth, Finn began. I appreciate the help, but I can handle this on my own. When Szeth smiled, years seemed to fall from him.
Jedi have a responsibility to Force sensitives, especially those like Gitza who have a real gift others would exploit.
His expression darkened abruptly.
It's hard to explain, but the Force guided me here. I'd like to see it through.
Well, who am I to argue with cosmic fate and destiny? Finn grumbled. Gib ran out to meet them when they pulled up at the port. Ignoring Szeth's reprimanding frown, Finn again clambered out before he stopped the speeder. What have you found, Gib? She asked, forcing calm into her voice as they jogged to the port building.
Not much, Captain. I got a couple reports of a skiff going really fast toward Nadris.
She and Gib pushed into the tiny port administration building. How long ago? Finn grabbed a chair, but in hands not quite still it slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. Gib waited until she righted it before responding.
Couple of hours.
Szeth's voice came from the door.
Why did they notice the skiff at all?
Gib eyed the Jedi, as if weighing where his loyalties lay.
It was big, new, fast. Nothing like that around here.
Finn cracked her knuckles and smirked inwardly when Szeth winced at the sound. Okay, Gib, I need to slice into the Nadris spaceport records. I'm looking for the incoming ship registry. The mechanic blanched, looking from Finn to Szeth and back again.
But Captain.
He stammered. Now Gib, she began, popping her finger joints one at a time. Just 'cause a self-appointed guardian of good is watching is no time to get all moral on me. The only way to figure out where Gitz is gone is to look at where they probably took her, got it? Gib nodded reluctantly, still eyeing the Jedi skeptically. Szeth winked and held out his hands in a "who am I to argue" gesture. Finn scooted up to the data console. After several minutes of work she spun back around with a growl. Gib, why do you keep fidgeting?
Well, Captain. That will work eventually, but...
Gib glanced at Szeth, face creased with worry.
I know a quicker way.
Szeth laughed.
Don't worry, Gib. I won't tell.
Gib wilted with relief. 30 seconds later they were scrolling through the Nadris port entries.
I need to see the ship names,
Szeth announced suddenly, crowding them at the terminal. Throwing Szeth an annoyed look and an elbow in the ribs, Finn shot back, and I need to see what flight plans and cargo they registered. Gib keyed a command and 3 columns of information appeared. Finn began anxiously searching.
There.
Szeth suddenly exulted. He shrank back as Finn pinned him with a favored glare from her extensive repertory. And why do you think so?
Just the name, Rookie.
Szeth hedged.
I have a feeling about it.
A feeling? Sorry, Jedi, but we need something solid. Finn turned back to study the screen. I don't suppose your feeling noticed the Rook arrived the day after I did, registered a flight plan from Chad and Nal Hutta, and made no customs declaration. Even though a ship that class has over 2,000 metric tons of cargo space.
Captain,
Gib said, new worry coloring his tone.
See that blinking indicator? The Rook filed clearance to leave.
Finn felt cold dread settle in her stomach like the local brew. How long?
An hour, maybe 2.
Szeth moved in closer, studying the flashing light.
It'll take us all night to get back to Nadris, unless you've got something faster than my speeder.
There wasn't anything else. They all knew that. The ladies' drive was still in pieces. Nothing in the port could run, much less fly. Finn began working furiously on the console's keypad. If you've got any tricks, she said to Zeth.
I told you, it doesn't work that way.
Why was a hermetic force zealot barely out of his teens so gloomy? Finn pushed aside the thoughts clouding her rapid-fire keystrokes. Well, good thing I've got a few tricks, she said. Behind her she heard Gibbs' low chortle.
That'll keep them here into the next growing season, Captain.
Finn pushed out of her seat. Seeing Zeth grinning at her handiwork on the terminal, she felt the satisfaction of being able to impress a Jedi. She tugged on Zeth's arm. Come on. Let's move. Songs of lovers lost or left behind and the intoxicants consumed to forget them were woven into the fabric of every culture built around spacefaring and alcohol production. Corellia had a million such madrigals, Finn knew half of them, and had lived the other half. When she'd been a small, dirty-faced child, singing the off-color lyrics in a busy spaceport was a sure way to earn a few extra credits or even a hot meal. Now, 30-some years later, she sang them when she was nervous, excited, or drunk. Finn dashed about the ladies' main cabin gathering her gear. Best I can hope for is a long life and a merry one. A quick death and an easy one. Singing slightly off-key, she snapped the last drawer closed. Zeth stood patiently, saying nothing as Finn added 2 more detonators to the pile on the table in front of him. A fast ship and a sturdy one, Finn sang with more gusto about the ship than the easy death. She began methodically tucking the toys and gadgets into her flight suit pockets. A tall ale and another one, she finished with a flourish. Finn dropped a vibro-shiv into each boot and added her lucky holdout blaster to yet another pocket at her sleeve. With a satisfied sigh she began checking the settings on her heavy blaster. Zeth ran a hand over his mouth to keep from smirking. He then removed his belt, placed it on the table, and shrugged out of his Jedi robe. Balling it up, he tossed the robe into the corner. He again donned his belt, unclipped the lightsaber hanging there, and slipped it into a pocket at his side.
Well?
He finally asked.
Do I pass?
Take that earnest expression off your face and it just might work. The smile finally broke out, and he glanced away to hide it. You have a sidearm? Finn asked, circling around him for a more thorough inspection.
I don't need one.
Wait. Don't tell me. The Force will protect you.
Actually, I figured you were carrying enough firepower to defend me and Coruscant.
When the only reply was Finn's evil eye, Zeth amended.
I have my lightsaber, and the Force.
This is my Force power. It's called a blaster. She sent the weapon in its home at her hip. Let's go. Finn was usually about as communicative as a Gamorrean. But charging along a dark thoroughfare to rescue someone who didn't deserve saving seemed to inspire confidences. So as she slammed down bottle after bottle of a carbonated, highly charged drink, appropriately dubbed Rush, the words tumbled out of her with a speed rivaling that of their headlong race into the night. She told Zeth about her youth on the streets of Coronet and even a little bit about Jet. Zeth's tale, like hers, began haltingly, then flowed. On learning he had been on Kessel, they spent the past hour trading Morith dual stories.
So, anyway,
Zeth said, taking another long pull on his bottle.
I never would have gotten off Kessel if Han hadn't shown up.
Solo? Finn choked back a swallow of her Rush.
Yeah.
Zeth waited a beat before adding.
You know him.
Stay out of my mind, Jedi. She warned.
I wasn't in it.
He shot back.
But I can't help it if you broadcast your feelings like an emotional hull of it.
Guess I'll just have to think quieter around you, won't I? Finn clamped her mouth shut.
You have deep feelings and strong loyalties,
Zeth pontificated.
Why do you try hiding them?
Not put off by her stony silence, he pushed.
Because if you don't, then why are we going after Gitza, anyway? Space, you don't even like her.
Because she's my partner, that's why, Finn finally burst out. And no one harms any partner of mine. Except me.
Did someone harm Jet?
Zeth asked gently. Finn laughed, short and bitter. If you call a vibroshiv through the neck harm, then I guess so.
I'm sorry, Finn,
he said softly. She wanted to hold on to the anger, as she would a blaster or a lover. But instead, with Szeth's unsolicited and compassionate sincerity, she felt the hurt drain away without the energy to maintain it. "Thanks," she said, and sarcasm was the best she could muster. "That's mighty Jedi of you." Finn looked quickly enough to see Szeth smile.
"So from where does this disdain for Jedi spring?"
he asked.
"Your denigration approaches an art form."
"Oh, I don't know," Finn replied, matching his lighter tone. "I just have a problem with authority and earnest self-righteousness."
"No, Sith,"
Szeth retorted. "Watch your mouth, Junior. That kind of language could get you in trouble." Szeth laughed.
"You're right. If I go back swearing like a smuggler, they'll never let me out again."
Finn smirked in spite of herself. "Just tell them you learned it all from a great master." His laughter abruptly stopped. Szeth turned away to stare moodily into the darkness. They rode in silence as Finn tried to work out what she had said to provoke Szeth's capricious reaction. Giving up, she tried the blunt approach. "So, as long as we're spilling our souls all over the deck here, what's this banda on your back? Did you drop a rock on another spoonbender or something?" Szeth remained mute, as if weighing what to tell her. His voice was distant and sorrowful when he finally spoke.
"I used my power as a Jedi, for revenge."
Finn glanced at Szeth. He was staring down at his upturned palms as if they were somehow dirty. She tore her eyes from the sight to concentrate again on the road. Vengeance was something she could certainly understand, but Finn suddenly didn't want to hear any more of this young man's tortured story. Before she could say anything, Szeth continued.
"In my arrogance I thought the ends justified the means."
Szeth's voice dropped to a whisper.
"My brother and many others paid the price for my fall to the dark side."
Finn gasped as the pieces began to fall into place. The wild rumors she had heard, the things he had said. When the answer finally popped into her consciousness, she'd never be sure if she deduced it herself or if he had planted it there. "Karita," she breathed. "Millions dead, billions, an entire star system wiped out of existence." She swerved the speeder to the side, slamming on the brakes as her mind screamed again. "Karita." Aghast, she turned to see the Jedi staring out the window, fighting the tears clinging to his lashes. He nodded ever so slightly. She was sharing a landspeeder, her life, with the most notorious mass murderer since Palpatine. This innocent-looking man, this kid, was another Vader. A butcher. He killed billions. Suddenly claustrophobic in the close speeder, Finn fumbled for an escape. A cool breeze flooded in as she shoved the hatch open. Finn staggered across the road, feeling the universe buckle under her feet. Billions dead. And she liked him. That was the worst of it. She had fallen completely for his wide-eyed innocence, the shy smile. The incongruity hit her like a nova. She lost the battle to control her spiraling emotions and the waves of nausea splashing over her. Falling to her knees, Finn emptied her stomach into the soft, tilled field. The universe had just stopped spinning when she heard him come up behind her. Finn struggled to her feet. "So, you're Sithan Durin?" she demanded. "Kip Durin?"
"Yes."
"You lied to me." Finn straightened up and shoved her hands into her pockets, staring down at her feet. She needed new boots, she noted, then mentally kicked herself for allowing such a thought now.
"Yes,"
Kip responded after a long pause. "They have a word for what you did. It's called genocide."
"I know,"
Kip replied, his voice breaking slightly. Finn spun around, blind wrath overcoming self-preservation. She poked her index finger in the center of his chest. "Then tell me, Jedi," she choked on the word. "How come you're allowed to roam the galaxy recruiting others, recruiting my partner, to follow in your footsteps?" Kip remained silent, shoulders hunched, staring at the ground. "Why aren't you in jail?" she demanded. Giving him another, much harder shove, she shrieked, "Why weren't you executed?" He fell to the ground in an unresisting heap.
"I don't know,"
Kip said, his voice ragged.
I should be dead."
Finn went for the reassurance of her blaster, bitterly cold to the touch. She raised it, taking aim at the filth before her. She had killed better than this before and for less than crimes against the galaxy. He finally looked up at her, and she could see tears glistening on his face.
No one would ever blame you, Finn, for killing the murderer of billions of sentients.
Finn felt an itching in her fingers. He wants me to kill him, she abruptly realized. Please, Finn, came the wail in her mind. He outstretched his hands to her. Finn was moved, but not to pity. You're a real black-hearted coward, Jedi, she snarled, thrusting the blaster back in her holster. Trying to get me to do something you don't have the courage to do yourself. She hauled him to his feet. Listen, you Sith Lord. She forced as much venom into the invective as she could and had the pleasure of seeing him wince at an epithet that was no longer amusing. Finn vowed she would never use the curse again. I don't give 10 credits whether you live or die. I'd gladly cut you down and rid the universe of your miserable existence. She roughly grabbed him by the elbow, propelling him to the speeder. But not until after we get my partner out. Got it? And I'm telling you again, Gitza responded patiently. I've never heard of this before. Keelan Brassley's blow knocked her out of the chair. Bound at the hands and ankles, Gitza managed to twist her body so only muscle met the unyielding ship deck.
That's not what we hear, counselor,
Brassley sneered. Gitza had been beaten many times before. It was an occupational hazard working for the Hutts. On a scale of 1 to 10, Brassley's efforts were about an 8, maximizing pain while minimizing long-term damage. A true artisan. She curled up into a ball, making a smaller target for the inevitable kick. Brassley really put his weight into it as his heavy foot slammed into her, again and again. Dawn was less than an hour away. Finn followed the speeder's map through Nadris to the spaceport and an alley that ran along the back of the port. She maneuvered the speeder down the narrow passage, weaving back and forth between the trash and broken, pitted pavement. They hadn't exchanged 2 sentences since Kip's revelations on the darkened roadway. She eased the speeder into a sheltered alcove and shut it down. When he still didn't say anything, Finn asked, "You coming?" Kip hopped out of the speeder but remained mute. The back port wall loomed above them, slimy, dirty and a full 5 meters high. Scanning up and down the alley, Finn found the hoped-for service entrance. I'm going to try getting it open, she indicated with a nod. You stand watch, okay? Finn pulled a palm-sized device from a pocket and set it over the door's security lock.
Is that what I think it is?
Kip asked. Finn cocked an eyebrow at his disapproving voice. If you think it's an Opirus Model FD-62 security descrambler, then it's exactly what you think it is.
Aren't those illegal?
So's murder, Finn scoffed. It was several moments before Kip asked quietly.
Did you murder everyone you thought was responsible for Jet's death?
Finn almost dropped the descrambler. She could tell where this was going. Being on the moral high ground was a rarity she wasn't anxious to give up.
Did you?
Kip repeated. Yes, she finally said, as slowly as the descrambler was working.
If more people had been responsible, would you have retaliated against them, too?
You killed billions. Finn burst out. She glanced nervously around, but the alley remained deserted.
I know,
Kip moaned.
I relive it every day. But given the power and means, wouldn't you have done the same to avenge Jet?
The answer wasn't nearly as simple as it should have been. The sound of a slick-as-grease human voice woke her.
Brassley, please seat the counselor.
Gitza craned her neck but got only lancing agony for the trouble. Brassley roughly yanked her up from the deck and shoved her into a chair. Across a table from her sat a young, well-dressed man.
I apologize for Brassley's enthusiasm.
He waved his hand, fingering a data card between his fingers. Gitza noticed a datapad on the table that hadn't been there before.
Untie her, Brassley.
Gitza gasped as he loosened the bonds, feeling blood rush to her feet and hands. Although he commanded even Brassley's obedience, the man who gave the unquestioned order was too young and unpolished to have occupied the position very long. His suit indicated more wealth than taste. Do your Desaligic clan masters know your Coruscantan accent is faked? Gitza asked through a split and bleeding lip. He flushed.
No one mentioned the Desaligics, or indeed the huts, at all.
Brassley and I have met before. And I've been aboard the Rook several times. Gitza felt a warm trickle and impatiently wiped the blood from her chin. Admittedly, the circumstances were different.
No doubt during the time your hut clan methodically stripped my own.
With his appropriately calm, detached response, Gitza conceded that the Desaligics had not sent someone completely green for this assignment. She needed more information if she was going to talk her way out of this one. Counselor, I do not know your name. He continued flipping the data card in his fingers as if it were a sabak card. A sabak card, Gitza mused. He started as a gambler.
I am Counselor Rao,
he said decisively, sliding the card into the pad on the table.
And now, Counselor Dogder, we will discuss Durga the Hut's investment in the Orko Consortium.
I wouldn't have done it, Finn said. She modulated the descrambler again, but it was 1 year too old and the door was 1 year too new.
I know,
Kip replied from where he stood watch.
But you did think about it?
Yes. She truly had. In her grief and despair over Jet's murder, Finn acted more violently than at any other time in her life. But still, she wouldn't have gone as far as her Jedi lookout.
I hate what I did. There are days when I think the guilt will drive me mad.
Kip said, his voice wavering.
It would be easier if I were locked up somewhere.
Or dead, Finn offered helpfully.
As you said, that's the coward's way out.
Finn pocketed the descrambler and brushed her hands off on the front of her flight suit. This isn't going to work. We have to find another way in. Kip slumped against the wall, hanging his head miserably. His bangs again fell over his eyes.
They didn't lock me away, and I'm not dead.
He choked on a dry sob.
What am I supposed to do, Finn?
How should I know? Finn retorted, angry that she actually felt sorry for him. Finn Nabon as judge, moralist, and confessor? If it weren't so comical it would be grotesque. Other priorities were more pressing than a murderer's atonement. She cleared her throat roughly. I guess you just make sure it never happens again. Kip drew his arms protectively around himself.
What if that's not enough?
You do what the rest of us do. She lifted his chin with her forefinger, forcing him to look at her. The best you can.
But if I fail?
He trailed off. I'll hunt you down and kill you myself. Their eyes met, and then Finn tore away from his grateful stare. Come on. Time for Plan B. Your source is air, Gitza said, with a patience she didn't feel. I haven't worked for Durga's clan for over 3 years. The blast of a voice over a comm at the cabin door startled all of them.
Counselor?
The disembodied and deferential speaker asked.
I told you not to interrupt us.
Ral snapped. Striding to the comm, he adjusted the controls so Gitza could not overhear the apparent orders and counterorders.
I'll be right up,
Ral said curtly. He awarded her a dark glare.
It seems that Nadris Customs refuses to lift the quarantine placed on our ship for suspected biological contagions.
Indeed? Gitza queried blandly, heart leaping. Slicing into the Nadris records to embargo the ship would be classic Finn.
It is remarkable since the Rook declared no cargo,
Ral mused. He nodded to Brassley.
Clean her up. Customs will be inspecting the ship. Then lock the good counselor in here, so she may refresh her recollections undisturbed.
She remained impassive under his thoughtful stare, but Ral was as shrewd.
And Brassley, alert your team. We must be ready for any uninvited guests.
We should be within a bay or two of where the Rooks docked, Finn commented. They hid behind a trash heap in the alley. The port's back wall towered above them.
We're going to have to hurry,
Kip said, turning toward her. His serious countenance suddenly changed, a smirk appearing where solemnity had been. His eyes flickered up to her face. What is it? Finn growled, brushing a loose strand of hair away with her elbow.
There's something you should know.
What now?
There's a big smudge of dirt on your forehead.
Finn felt her face redden and warm. She wiped her forehead with her glove and saw a large smear of black grease. Groaning, she remembered working on the ladies' drive a lifetime ago. It's been on there since you met me at the ship, right? The smirk was now a full-blown grin.
Uh-huh.
You could have said something, she accused, still wiping.
I just did.
Kip raised his hand, touching her temple.
You missed a spot.
Oddly, Finn didn't shudder at his touch. Is it gone? She asked, rubbing her face again. He nodded and turned back to study the wall.
We could climb it.
Finn reached a quick decision. Kip, there's something I should tell you. He glanced at her quizzically.
Do I have food stuck in my teeth?
It's about Gitza.
I know already, Finn.
Kip interrupted. Rage swept through her again. You were reading my mind. She accused. Kip rolled his eyes.
I didn't need to. I've been searching through the Force since I landed. I would have sensed someone with Gitza's reputed skills pretty quickly, especially once she was kidnapped.
You've known all along? She stammered. And you were still gonna help me spring a cheap con who finally got what she had coming to her?
I know you don't like to hear it, but the Force guided me here.
He took a deep breath.
I think I'm beginning to see why.
Finn digested that fact and finally felt an easier truce settle between them. She scrambled to her feet. Why don't you try using the Force to throw the rope and grappling hook over the wall? Kip nodded and rose with the rope they brought from the speeder. He swung the hook up in a smooth arc. They heard a gentle clatter. Kip tested his weight on the line, then clambered up the wall as easily as an insect. Finn's ascent was not nearly as graceful. She was grunting with the effort when something suddenly scooped her up and deposited her on the top of the wall.
Easy,
Kip muttered, lending a steadying hand as Finn teetered on the narrow ledge. To her annoyance, he seemed perfectly balanced 5 meters above the ground. Finn glared at him, but Kip was neither intimidated nor apologetic. He only shrugged.
Force grip.
Oh. Thanks, Finn managed. She quickly scanned the port. There. She pointed at a hulking truck freighter 2 docking bays over. They ran lightly across the top of the wall, a race against the coming dawn and prying eyes. From the wall Kip leaped to a rung on the ship's hull and climbed up to the Rook's top hatch. Finn was right behind him. Kip gave the hatch lever a strong pull. It didn't move.
It's locked.
Of course it is. Finn withdrew another device from her pockets of tricks.
Let me guess.
Kip asked.
An illegal shipjacking kit?
She set the decoder over the hatch lock, and it began rapidly scrolling through security combinations, 1 digit at a time. I bet you keep all your ships unlocked on Yavin 4, don't you? Finn swallowed the remainder when she saw his stricken expression and remembered why he might be sensitive to ship thieving. Forget it. Sorry. Finn heard the gentle whirring of gears, then a soft snap. Are we clear down there? She demanded, returning the device to her pocket. Kip nodded. With her left hand on the hatch, Finn drew her blaster with her right.
Wait,
Kip ordered. Now she was really angry. What?
Your blaster,
Kip said, very earnestly. If you think I'm going in there without my blaster. Kip shook his head vigorously.
No, of course you should. But, Finn, you've got to put it on a stun setting.
Don't go getting all Jedi on me.
Finn, killing them won't bring Jet back.
He said it so gently she had to fight through a bantha-sized lump in her throat to respond. And not killing them won't bring your brother back. Kip looked at the lightsaber clutched in his hand.
I know. And I'll help you, Finn, regardless. But don't make me go down there knowing that more might die when I could have done something to prevent it.
He had found her vulnerability and twisted it for all it was worth. Stun may not stop what they throw at us, she warned.
I know,
Kip said.
But it's the right thing to do.
No good being right if you're dead, Finn retorted. They'd wasted enough time, she told herself, as she thumbed her blaster to a stun setting. She popped the hatch open, warm, yellow light poured out. Kip dropped down. Finn was less adroit, grabbing the sides of the hatch and hoisting herself into the hole. What should have been a fall felt like a slide through feathers, and she landed lightly and soundless. Convenient thing, that force grip. Kip glanced around quickly, then pushed a pressure plate on the wall. A door slid open and they scurried into the dark cabin.
How should we look for her?
He asked. Can't you just sense her, or something? Finn said, as she quickly studied the room.
No, I've tried. There are a lot of fearful humans on this ship.
Kip suddenly moved back to the door.
Someone's coming,
He announced. Really? Well, I've never been afraid to ask for directions. Kip eased the cabin door open as heavy footfalls moved past. They slipped out silently and Finn exulted in the reunion. Hello, Brassley. Finn underscored her cheery greeting by ramming her blaster muzzle into the thug's back. Brassley stopped abruptly. That's right, Finn cooed. Put your hands up and away from that nice blaster at your side.
I figured you'd show up for that Scythian partner of yours, Nabon.
Brassley sneered, slowly turning around to face her. No swearing around Jedi, Finn remonstrated as Kip relieved Brassley of his weapon. Now, are you going to tell me where she is, or is this Jedi going to have to go into that mass of pathetic neurons you call a brain and pull it out? When she and Kip burst into the cabin, with Brassley at the end of a blaster muzzle, Gitz's exclamation of Finn encompassed relief and a question, all in a single word. Finn roughly shoved Brassley into a chair. Sit. To Gitza she said, got anything to tie him up? What Brassley used on me will work admirably on him, Gitza said, snapping a length of cord in her hands. There was an ugly bruise across Gitza's face, but she was mobile. You okay? Finn blurted as she let go of the mental image of another partner's blood staining the floor. Nothing that a week in a spa won't cure. As Gitza trussed and gagged Brassley, the man's grunts reflected her enthusiasm for the task. Gitza let the moments beat by, then, as her cunning eyes slid over Kip, added, So Finn, you found a real Jedi. Reluctant to disclose his secret, Finn was relieved when Kip stepped forward.
I'm Kip Duran.
Gitza started. Duran? Jedi Kip Duran? Save it for later, Finn broke in. Gitza had worked for Hutts, she'd be able to handle rescue by a mass murderer.
I sealed the door,
Kip offered. Then how will we get out? Finn countered. They all jumped as a new, commanding voice burst into the cabin.
Brassley, report.
Gitza pointed at the comlink affixed to Brassley's collar. It's Counselor Ral. He's running this operation. Finn strode to the bound man, tore the gag from his mouth and aimed her blaster squarely between his eyes. You are going to answer your comlink. You try being cute and I'll blow you apart. Brassley nodded.
What is it, Ral?
His voice was rough but otherwise normal.
Where are you?
Tell him you're here. Finn mouthed.
I'm with Counselor Dogder.
Brassley rasped.
Good.
The other voice barked.
Stay there. We may have been boarded. We're searching the ship now.
The other voice clicked off. As Finn crammed the gag back in Brassley's mouth, Gitza plucked the comlink from his uniform and affixed it to her own collar.
Finn,
Kip called. Yeah? He was studying the cabin wall.
This is an exterior bulkhead, right?
There's about a half-meter of reinforced hull between you and the big, bad galaxy, if that's what you mean. What are you? Finn's words died in her throat and Gitza's sharp gasp was abruptly drowned out by the low hum of the bright violet blade in Kip's hand. A Jedi Knight and a lightsaber. It was almost holy, hearkening back to an era long gone in her lifetime. Impossibly it lived again in the cramped cabin of a Hutt freighter. Kip laughed.
Now, Finn, don't you start. I'll just cut through and we'll be out of here.
He pivoted to Gitza and offered her the shimmering lightsaber.
Unless you would like to do it.
No, wait. Finn cried as Kip raised his lightsaber. If you cut through there, it'll set off the hull breach alarms. They'll be on top of us before we can get out of here.
I could cover you,
Kip asserted. Both of us? For how long? Finn responded. And with how many dead? She added silently for Kip. When he nodded slightly, Finn knew he understood. It's still a good idea though. She strode over to the cabin's control panel and tore off the cover. Her partner was already anticipating Finn's plan. Do you have something that can generate a continuous loop? Gitza asked. Yeah. I think we can rig one of the no-shows I brought. Finn reached into a pocket at her thigh and pulled out the device. She handed it to Gitza. See what you can do with it.
What's a no-show?
Kip asked over her shoulder. He had, Finn noticed, shut down the lightsaber. Something else you wouldn't approve of, Finn said lightly. It's a passive field generator, Gitza explained. Finn heard a snap as the no-show split in Gitza's hands. Wearing one makes you invisible to most detection technologies. The cabin's sensors for things like hull integrity all run through the circuit, Finn said, working a pair of cutters out of another pocket with one hand and pointing to the wiring in the wall. From here it feeds into the ship's computer.
So you are going to slice into it and use the no-show to create an uninterrupted feed from here to the computer?
Kip's voice indicated he wasn't quite cut out for this sort of skullduggery. More or less. Finn responded, sorting through the multicolored wires in the panel. Which one was for hull integrity again? She shrugged the doubt away, jammed the cutters between her teeth, and began teasing green wire out of the panel. Gits, she mumbled through a mouthful of tool, you got that gen rigged yet? Yes. As her partner clamped the generator onto the wire, Finn commented, I've never seen a hairpin used like that before. Don't talk with your mouth full, Finn. Finn spit out the cutters and sliced into the circuit. She held a ragged breath, but no alarm sounded. That should keep them off our backs. They both pivoted about on hearing the hum as Kip again ignited his lightsaber. He swung the blade over his head and began slicing through half a meter of metal like a boot through mud. You know, Finn, Gitza commented, staring at the young Jedi now deliberately sawing through ship hull. I don't want to see a lightsaber on the black market. Ever. Kip was through in a few edgy minutes and closed down the lightsaber.
There's a skin of metal still holding it on. We'll have to push our way out.
Finn put a shoulder to the makeshift door. As Gitza hesitated, Finn chided her, come on. Here's a use for those shoulder pads. I was just wondering what we do once we break out of the ship. Finn looked at Kip. He shrugged.
Run?
Chuckling, Finn started the count. On her, 3. The hull plate buckled, then clattered to the ground. Fresh air and light streamed in. Anyone around? She asked Kip. He shook his head.
For now, no. But we don't have much time.
One more thing, Gitza injected, with a nod toward the wide-eyed Brassley, still tied to the chair. Shouldn't we dispose of him? Finn understood from where that desire for revenge came. Brassley obviously worked over her partner pretty hard, judging from the bruises and busted lip. Kip solved the problem by jumping out the door to the ground some 2 meters below.
Come on,
he gestured. She jumped down and Gitza followed. They landed in the shadow of the Rook's underbelly, concealed by a landing skid. Kip gestured to the docking bay's entrance on the other side of the landing pad.
I think that's the only way out.
And it's in the line of their laser cannons, Finn noted, heart sinking. Gitza pursed her lips. I bet they've security coded the door, too. Kip pushed the hair out of his face again, a gesture that was part need and part unconscious habit.
Finn, if you can take whatever comes out of the ship, and Gitza, you work the door, I'll handle the rest.
Just like that? Finn challenged. The Jedi Knight nodded.
Just stay behind me.
They had covered half the distance between the ship's bow and the docking bay exit. Finn was beginning to think maybe no one would notice when Kip started yelling.
Get to the door,
he called. Behind them, Finn heard the ear-splitting whine of laser fire. She instinctively ducked and pushed Gitza forward to the entrance, but couldn't place what the ricochet sound was. Finn whirled around and, for a second, reflexes honed by years of dodging and answering blaster fire failed her. Kip, the kid of a Jedi, was standing alone in the middle of the docking bay. Laser fire poured from the Rook's forward guns. And like some weird children's toy, Kip caught the green killing bolts on his lightsaber and tossed them away. Finn! She heard Gitza shout. She spun about. Her partner was under the entrance's marginal cover. It is locked. You'll need to hold them off a few minutes. A few minutes. It was a lifetime in moments like this. She ran back to Kip. Methodically, even calmly, he deflected each burst of fire. The blasts bounced off the lightsaber, ricocheting at crazy angles. Out of the corner of her vision, Finn saw movement, flickers at the top of the Rook's ramp, inside the ship. From behind Kip's protective cover she crouched down, steadied her blaster on her knee and caught each of the Hutt henchmen in a blue wave of stun blasts as they emerged from the ship. Her mind had been ticking off the seconds. She knew, rationally, they had not been under fire for more than a minute. It seemed an eternity. Gitza was good at locks, but they were only two people against an entire ship. If Kip started to get tired, or faltered just once. The wail of repulsors suddenly filled the docking bay. What the? Finn glanced up, wondering why it had gone so dark. A freighter hovered overhead. It was obviously piloted by someone who was really angry, and a friend, Finn concluded with surprise, as the ship poured cannon fire into the Rook. The Rook shuddered, helpless on the ground. Finn stared again at the ship, noticing the distinctive bow markings, the equipment standard on no other YT. The Star Lady? What was her ship doing here? Finn's personal comlink burst to life.
Captain, this is Gib. I figured you might need some help.
He underscored the point with another volley into the grounded ship. The roar of the Rook coming to life drowned out Finn's shrieking invective at the reckless mechanic. The Rook's repulsor screamed, blowing dust in the landing bay. Threatened from above, the ship abandoned her victims on the ground and surged up. Finn felt her heart stop as the Rook swerved and narrowly missed the hovering Star Lady. Free of the docking bay, the Rook shot into the sky. Gib! She screeched into the comlink. You bring my ship back. Don't you dare. But Gib did dare, darting after the retreating Rook.
It's all right, Captain. She's running now. I've called Nadris Customs. They'll intercept.
Finn yanked a pair of macro binoculars out of another pocket and glued her eyes to the scene. Who's that piloting the Star Lady? She heard Gitza ask.
Gib,
came Kip's weary voice. With a supreme effort Finn tore herself away from the vision of the lady chasing the much bigger, and better armed, truck. In a tone full of disbelieving admiration, Gitza added, It really was good of you to let Gib fly the lady here. Finn could only nod weakly. To Kip, she managed, You did great. Kip smiled back and pushed sweaty hair off his forehead.
I'm just glad we didn't have to kill any of them.
Actually. Gitza began. Frowning, Finn asked, What? Well, they have no way of knowing about that hole Kip cut in the hull. If they get too high up. Kip turned gray. Gib! Finn yelled into the comlink. Back off. Tell Nadris Customs not to chase them. That ship's not space-worthy. She'll blow if she goes much higher. Gitza looked bewildered. What's the problem? Later, Gitz. To Kip she said, Can't you do something so they turn back? Kip was looking up, into the space of sky the ships were heading.
Even if I could, the Force shouldn't be used that way.
His piercing sorrow made Finn ache. Gitza humphed, then unclipped the comlink she'd taken from Brassley and thumbed it on. I'm warning you though, it won't work. Try. Finn demanded. Counselor Ral, this is Dogder. She smoothly cut off his sputtering rage. Yes, as you have surmised, I have Brassley's comlink. Now, Ral, I am quite serious here. You have a hull breach. You'll never clear the lower atmosphere. You have to come back. They heard laughter. "He's a gambler," Gitza explained. "He thinks I'm bluffing." "Try again," Finn urged. Staring into the sky, Kip murmured,
Customs still thinks the ship is under quarantine. They'll try to stop it.
Finn brought the macrobinocs back up to her face. She could just make out the rook. Per her orders, Gib had not pursued. But Finn could see two smaller ships moving fast and firing wildly at the retreating rook. "Rel, this is Counselor's oath," Finn heard Gitza say. "I swear you have a hull breach."
Too late,
Kip whispered. From the comm link they heard a scream, then a burst of static. Through the macrobinocs, Finn saw a flash. And the rook was gone. It was the one place in the galaxy Finn thought she would never go. They landed on a humble pad at the base of an enormous stone structure. A temple, Finn guessed, built by some ancient and subjugated race. A rather odd place for a Jedi Academy, she thought. Through the cockpit viewport they could all see a cluster of very somber, brown-clad beings of varying sexes and species. "Welcoming committee?" she asked Kip, forcing a quip. Kip shook his head, shrugging out of his seat restraints.
Something's going on.
Finn slid out of her seat, but Gitza remained glued to her chair.
You're not coming?
Kip asked her. Gitza looked away from the grave Jedi outside the ship. "No, Kip," she said slowly. "I don't think so." Confirming that the experience had not irrevocably sobered her, she added, "Not even if I could pick up a few pointers for next time." Kip's mouth turned up in the beginning of knowing grin.
Be true to yourself, Gitza dogged her. That's the only pointer you'll ever need.
He slipped out of the cockpit. With a final glance back at Gitza, Finn followed him out. In a show of initiative that could become irritating if it were habitual, Kip had already opened the ship's hatch. A whoosh of hot, humid air surged into the cabin, leaving Finn momentarily breathless. Kip trotted down the ramp to his friends, or whatever they were, Finn thought sullenly. She followed, refusing to be cowed and annoyed that these priests could probably divine how nervous she really was. He exchanged a few words with them and the other Jedi dispersed. One woman, however, remained, exuding to Finn's eye a proprietary protectiveness. Finn leaned indolently against a landing ramp strut, returning the suspicion with a sardonic glare of her own. Kip hurried back, his face, Finn thought, a bit drawn. "Something wrong?" she asked.
Tyan says Master Skywalker has been injured.
"Again?" He smirked.
They've just broken orbit and should be in shortly.
Kip shifted, uncomfortably, as if he could feel the hot ground through his boots.
I should.
Finn waved him off. "I hate goodbyes," she said gruffly, wondering why her eyes were misting. "Must be something in the wretched jungle air. Get going. We'll see ourselves out." She turned, only to stiff Finn as a gentle hand at her shoulder brought her back around. Kip ducked his head, then glanced up through bangs that really needed a trim now.
I'll miss you, too, Finn.
He let his hand fall from her shoulder, blushing shyly at the bold move.
You sure you don't want to stay for a few days?
Positive. You're needed here. Finn glanced at the woman who must be Tyan, still patiently waiting. And the Academy certainly doesn't need me. She held out her hand, wishing now that the words weren't sticking in her craw. But if lifting big rocks doesn't work out, there's always a place for you on my crew. He stared at her offered hand for what seemed forever, then slowly took it, wrapping it in both of his own.
Thanks, Finn. For everything.
As Kip stumbled for something to say, Finn pulled away. You too, Jedi. She pivoted on a heel and headed back up the ramp without looking back. Kip finally found the words that had eluded him when she heard softly in her mind, "The Force is with you, too. Finn." They cleared the Academy airspace in half the time it had taken to get into it. Finn ignored the inquisitive hails from the inbound Corellian freighter and space yacht. As soon as they jumped, she fled to her quarters. A half hour of composure later, Finn rejoined her partner in the main cabin. With ceremonial solemnity, Gitza was depositing her brown robe and lightsaber handle in the ship's waste disposer. Gitza finally broke the silence and joined Finn at the gaming table. It's not as much fun anymore. I'm not sorry to see it go. Finn scowled. This whole trip has been a bust. Yes, it has. Gitza inserted a data card she had been fingering into a datapad and slid it across the table. I lifted this from Ral. What do you think? Orko Skymine? Never heard of it. That's what the Desaligic wanted me for, Gitza explained. They were looking for someone who could tell them what Durga was up to. She rubbed her cheek where the bruise was just beginning to fade. They were disappointed I hadn't heard of it either. So what? Finn shrugged. It's probably just some new Hutt corporate interclan espionage. Scroll down a little further. Finn moved down the pad, stopped, studied it, and then studied it again, and whistled. Whatever Orko is, they're raking it in and pouring it out again. It looks like the Hutts are up to something really big if this data is real. Gitza slid out of the booth to pace restlessly. The Desaligic clan believed it enough to track us down, sabotage your ship, and kidnap a former counselor from Durga's clan. Finn stared again at the readout on the datapad, an idea forming. Gits. She began slowly, this would be worth a lot of money to an information broker. Her partner visibly wilted and slumped into a cabin chair. I was afraid you'd suggest that. She burrowed manicured fingertips into her forehead to massage the creases there. Who? New Republic intelligence? Finn snorted. We'd have to explain way too much to a low-level flunky. And end up in their blaster sights for the trouble. And NRI won't pay top credit. No, I'd take this to Card. Gitza opened her eyes wide in surprise. Card? He hates me. Most of the fringe hates you, Gitza. But he'll pay good money for reliable information. That's not really the issue though, is it? No, Finn said carefully. It's whether you are finally willing to turn your back on the Hutts. She rose. Think about it. It's your decision. As she was heading out of the cabin, Gitza stopped her. Finn. She turned slowly around, knowing that her partner of 8 years was at a cusp. Even after all this time, Finn had no idea which way this would go. Be true to yourself, the Jedi had told Gitza. What did that mean to a woman who was a con to her core and had worked for Hutts most of her life? What do those numbers on the datapad look like to you? They're not what I would expect as a front for a smuggling operation or criminal syndicate. Gitza raised her eyes, and caught and held Finn's gaze. No, they weren't. Numbers of that magnitude are only found in a military budget. She hoisted herself out of her chair, moved over to the table, and removed the data card from the pad. Jabba made the same mistake, you know. What's that? Finn asked, taking the disc. Politics. Tangling with the wrong people. Not being content with dominion in the criminal fringe. Gitza shook her head. Call up your contact. Tell him we've got something Card will be very interested in. Card's got some good contacts within the New Republic. Because there was nothing so demeaning as a feudal sacrifice, Finn added, he'll make sure this gets to the right people. As she headed forward, Finn mused there should have been some acknowledgement to mark the occasion. In the twisted path of a lifetime and the moral ambiguity of the fringe, somehow both she and Gitza were doing the right thing. She supposed, she thought sourly, it came from meddling with Jedi. There was nothing simple to a Jedi's tricks. Nothing simple at all.
Thank you for listening to this unabridged audio presentation from the Star Wars Expanded Universe. The Decade Bird will fly again soon.